College Football Nerds here talking polls. We're going to show you a little bit of a power poll from our computer model. We did a 1 through 133 that we're going to showcase every week from here on out. That's something that y'all been asking for years now. We're also going to walk through our Nerd Nation, at least 15 or so of the top 25 that you all have put together. So we say y'all around here, so that y'all put together. collegefootballnerds.com. You can go there, sign up, it's free, and contribute to the top 25 poll. It's a totally fan-driven poll. So people that are on that site, on our site, that are checking out advanced statistics, box scores, playing around with our model that's available to you to play around with for free, simulate any two teams. It's out there, and while you're there, you can pop in a top 25 and contribute. And I think, and as you're going to see, it's better than the AP. So Josh, let's before we get into the computer model 1 through 133. And by the way, we're a little vulnerable. We're putting our model out there. We're putting how our model ranks teams out there. There's some tricky ones in there, and people are going to pick us apart, but I don't care. It's fun. The Nerd Nation Top 25, the thing that's exciting to me about this poll is the thing I hate about AP and coaches polls is that they start a preseason poll, and we didn't start our poll until week 5. They start a preseason poll, and then everything is an incremental adjustment off of what they started their preseason poll with, which means if you were ranked high and you don't lose, doesn't matter who you played, you stay high. If you were ranked low, even if you're really good and play a bunch of top 10 teams, if you lose one or two of those, you don't get ranked. I hate that. And it looks like our poll is a little more flexible in that the people that are contributing to it are actually watching ball week to week and don't necessarily keep you where you're at just because you won. So why don't you walk through the first few of those and we'll have a discussion off of it.
All right. So the Nerd Nation Top 25, we'll go through about 15 because just for the sake of time, we got to cut it short. But you can always go to collegefootballnerds.com, check it out for yourself, or follow us on the Twitter at CFBNerds. And, of course, like and subscribe, guys, if you like it. But number one, we diverge immediately. We got Michigan number one in the Nerd Nation Top 25, not Georgia. I think it makes sense. And as you'll see later, we don't have Georgia that high on our ratings. I don't think Georgia's done that much to deserve being higher. I know Michigan hasn't played great teams, but as we often say, dominating great opponents matters. So right off the bat, I think it shows. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Georgia. Number 4, Florida State. Number 5, Washington. Number 6, Oklahoma. Number 7, Texas. 8, Oregon. 9, Alabama. 10, Penn State. 11, Ole Miss. 12, Oregon State. 13, Utah. 14, Notre Dame. And 15, LSU. So a lot of differentiation there from the AP, and I won't go through it all. But, I mean, for the most part, I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like this is a pretty good top 15 ranking, top 25 ranking. And I do think they got a lot of stuff right on this.
Yeah, the thing that I like the most about this is if you look at our poll last week, Washington was ranked 3rd after their big win over Oregon. And then they, in our poll, they dropped 2 spots after, I think it was 7-3 against Arizona State going into the fourth quarter. To me, that shows people are watching ball and they care about how the actual games are played and not just watching the loss column. I like that part of it. The one where I would probably differ a little bit is, our model poll doesn't care about ranking. It is a pure kind of power rating, so to speak. But in this, I think that there is in my mind, I always do a combination. Like when we used to do top 10s, I would do a combination of is half power rating, half ranking. So I want to give you credit for the things that you've done, but also have a little eye test there. I don't love how Ohio State's playing offensively this year, but I do love that they have 2 big wins. And I think Notre Dame's a good team. I don't think they're a great team, and our poll reflects that. I think they're a good team. I think Penn State's a great defense. I think they're a pretty bad offense. But those are 2 big wins. Florida State, for me, is the one that has these ranked wins, but I can't put my finger on why I don't want them ranked 4th in my mind. Like, in my top 25, I don't have them 4th, I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, well, I think the problem there is they beat an LSU that was a top 5 to start the year, and then they beat a ranked Duke 38-20 in a game where they did, played pretty well and put them away, but weren't necessarily totally dominant against what's thought to be a good Duke team. But Duke is thought to be a good team in large part because Duke beat Clemson. And Clemson, as it turns out, is just really not particularly good, right? Notre Dame really just shut down Duke altogether. So the more I think the time elapses and the more you look at that Florida State schedule, blowing out LSU is a big deal, but I'm not sure how big of a deal. And Southern Miss is one of the worst teams in the country. Boston College is a terrible team, and you barely won that game. Virginia Tech is awful. Syracuse is terrible. Clemson, you went to overtime, arguably should have lost at one point, right? You know, it was sort of a miracle you win that game, and it's just Duke. I just feel like this is a team that is the most likely to make the playoff and just get run, frankly. In our ranking, which we'll turn to in a minute, I'll go ahead and tell you Florida State is not a top 10 team in our rating system. They are sitting there because the ACC, I think, actually is quietly kind of weak. They got a lot of traction off that LSU win, and this is a common theme to me between a couple teams, right? Washington fell back behind Florida State. Washington, I get why you drop them, but why? You know, there's a little recency bias there too, right? Florida State's close call against Boston College to me is no better than what happened in Washington against Arizona, and I think that might actually be more excusable in my mind. I think Washington should stay ahead of Florida State, off that Oregon win. So that's one area where I think it maybe is a little bit off. But it is interesting to me with the ACC and the Pac-12 both. I think a lot of the traction they get, and I know the AP also has Washington behind Florida State, was based off some early wins that had a lot of early hype, and I don't know that they mean quite as much as they originally do. LSU hasn't just dropped because they lost to Florida State. They've dropped because the defense is bad, and they've dropped a game and they've nearly dropped more, right? And in the Pac-12, Oregon and Washington don't play anyone out of conference of note. And, Colorado going and beating TCU was a big thing that was hyped. TCU is not a good team. That game doesn't really mean anything in the national landscape. Utah beating Florida soundly doesn't mean anything in the national landscape because Florida's a bad team. And I think we still have a lot of built-in assumptions about the ACC and the Pac-12 with some of these out-of-conference games. North Carolina beating up on South Carolina that haven't held up because those teams within their own conferences, like within the Big 12, within the SEC, have been doing really poorly. Beating up on a team that everybody in the SEC beats up on doesn't really move the needle that much to me. But that's kind of where I'll leave it with the Nerd Nation Top 25.
Yeah, I mean, for me with Washington, they now have 2 one-score wins over Arizona and Arizona State, and then the 3-point win over Oregon, which, by the way, they were one play away from losing that game. But I get your point there. I think LSU is a much better team now than they were in the beginning of the year, but it's also hard because they lost to Ole Miss. They killed Auburn. They beat a good Missouri team by 10. It's hard to know where to peg LSU. I think LSU has the best offense in the country. I think it's better than Washington's, but Washington's got a far superior defense than LSU, and I can say that pretty confidently because LSU has also gotten just shredded by decent offenses as well. So that's interesting. Alabama sitting there at 9 is a team that, if they put 2 halves together, could beat anyone ahead of them by 3 touchdowns, but they could also lose to anybody behind them by a couple touchdowns. So that's pretty interesting. I think the rest of this is going to kind of shake out over the next couple of weeks. The more interesting thing to me is this power rating, this 1 through 133. A lot of people won't show you the whole list because math and modeling gets a little screwy as you go down the list. And we've done a lot to sort of mitigate this and make this a really good poll. And also this poll, and I'm going to let you explain kind of how we do it, the math behind it. But the math behind it, or the model behind it, is the same model that you go to our website and check out the model that we've used for years on this channel, but it's even better, and you can talk through a little bit of that. But talk about, if I'm kind of giving you a head start, talk about the actual piece where we do the ranking in terms of predicted wins, maybe if we're going to discuss this more than getting into too many details about the model itself, and then kind of run with at least the first part of our power ranking.
Right. We've been waiting to release this until we got a Model V2 And the best way to describe it is the amount of behind the scenes code and stuff that's running. There's a lot of iterative code that goes in the model. It's increased by about 5 times the complexity level that's going on behind the scenes. And we've done a lot of stuff to control better for interconference ratings and quality for tempo. So a lot of things that have kind of bit us in the past, I really wanted to nail down before we did any kind of rating. But with that, Model V2, we've generated this 1 through 133. We wanted to get them all ready together so we could do the 133 when we knew it was actually going to be a better metric. And what it is actually kind of simple in practice compared to the model. We are taking the model, and we take every team in the country, and we have them modeled against every other team in the country. So we say, if you're Michigan and you played all other 132 teams in the country, what are going to be all the results? And then based on those predictions that were coming out of the model, we run a whole other algorithm on top of that to say what is the win probability of each game. So it's not just counting pure wins and losses, but it's based off actual likelihood of winning in each game. And we say, what would your predicted record be? So right now, Michigan's number 1 in our model, and their predicted record, if they played the entirety of college football, would be 130-2. It's not shocking if you follow elite teams in college football. Now, I think that number is going to come down. They haven't played quality competition, so it makes them look spotless in our model for the most part. I'll even say right now, I'm probably going to go to the Maryland-Michigan game. You know, we did a video that's probably going to be taken as a hit piece on Michigan, more just our anger at the cheating scandal. But I enjoy following Michigan. I've already bought tickets to go to the Maryland-Michigan game at Maryland because I want to go see Michigan football, and it's going to be interesting to see how they end the year. But yeah, you know, so you see your predicted record. We always said, right, and they're all top 25. How did you do against your schedule, and how would somebody else have done with your schedule if you traded places? Well, we just solved that problem completely and said, okay, you play everybody in the country. Michigan is 1, Ohio State's 2, Oregon is 3, Georgia 4, Washington 5, Oklahoma 6, Penn State 7, Texas 8, Kansas State 9, we'll touch on that, LSU 10, Notre Dame 11, Florida State 12, Alabama 13, Miami 14, USC 15. And I'll stop there for the sake of time, but we're eventually going to publish this, and you go to collegefootballnerds.com and look at the entire list. Again, see all our dirty laundry 1 through 133.
The thing that I like about this is it just, like, it's not just a straight, you know, model score and then rank by highest score to lowest score. This is looking at every game. So there might be a team, we did this earlier today, like Alabama, if you modeled Alabama against LSU, Alabama slightly beats them because of the matchups. But Alabama is ranked behind them in the power rating here, which to me shows that it's doing a lot more complicated stuff than just doing a heads-up situation. But I like this because, you know, one, it's helped us, doing this has helped us validate that our model's working. We've had some code issues, largely on my side, some code issues that have sort of put out some maybe false positives in terms of model that we've had to tweak for our just getting it right. But doing this ranking has kind of helped us really dial that in, because you can kind of see how things laid out. But what's cool is this model, our model, and this ranking has no awareness of recruiting rankings or previous seasons. This is how a computer sees these teams based solely on how they've done this year. And from that standpoint, the fact that we're getting it at least directionally accurate is pretty encouraging. You've got a note about Kansas State. This is the one, when I saw this, I sent you a note and I said, Kansas State is a little bit of an outlier, but you did some digging there.
Yeah, as we said, we had to solve some hiccups, one of which there was a team in the top 10 that we were scratching our heads at. And we were able to confirm it was actually an error in the data that we were provided. We had to create a little algorithm to sort out that kind of error in the future to make sure we didn't introduce it. Stuff like that sneaks in when you're doing large-scale data dumps. It just takes a lot of time with live data to catch stuff. So, you know, as we've always said, this is a beta, and now it's finally getting accurate. But Kansas State we thought might be one of those aberrations. But I started digging into it. It's really not, because in FEI, which bcftoys.com, you can go look at FEI rankings from Brian Fremeau. they're a top 15 team. If you look at ESPN's FPI, Kansas State's a top 15 team. I mean, I've got it right now. They're 14th in FPI and they're 12th in FEI. And those rankings do use priors. They start to slide off as time goes. But the point being, even with recruiting rankings and priors, they're not falling out of the top 15. So it's kind of funny that in our model, the best 2-loss team is not LSU. It's actually Kansas State. And when you go look at like the Oklahoma State game, I began to realize in many ways they actually outplayed Oklahoma State from a pure statistical perspective. And that is why they're so high. So the one thing I thought was weird is that example. But to Daniel's point from earlier, our model is heavily matchup dependent. People have asked us for a ranking for years, and we didn't do it because, especially when it's doing it by hand, we don't have a power rating for a team. It doesn't work that way. It makes the teams play each other, figures out a result, and it's extremely matchup dependent on how everything works. We don't do a lot of people just sort of create like an EPA rating and compare them, and then you can take the differences between the EPAs or the EPA quality for offense and you can turn it directly into a score. We don't work that way. We actually create unique scoring models for each team, and in fact, we're actually creating multiple scoring models for each team, ranking them, doing weighting stuff, and amalgamating them. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. And so, like, Alabama beats Kansas State. LSU beats Kansas State, I believe, if you model them. Now, they start beating teams as you go further down the list, like Kansas State, I think, is favored over USC and a lot of teams below it. But this ranking is based off how you would do if you played everybody else in the country. So there are a lot of teams like LSU and Alabama that have an on half and an off half. USC gets put all the way down at 15, right, as a power rating. Because what it's saying is, hey, Kansas State, when they play a bad team, Kansas State, the reason they're that high, they're one of the best run teams in the country. If not maybe the best rush offense in the country, in just pure rush offense. And so when they play a bad team, they're just going to run them over and they're going to win. And, LSU's defense is so bad that a lot of bad teams that can throw the ball pretty well might beat them. Alabama has games where they just don't show up on offense, so they might actually lose. Kansas State is more consistent. So our ranking is really balancing your ability to beat good teams and also your ability to play consistent football, which I think is important. And I think gets lost a lot of times in power ratings because they're just based off from a really micro perspective in this one game. If you play your B+ game, what's it like, right? That's what our model's doing in sort of an isolation. But your ability to play more consistent football over the course of the year, your ability to beat opponents consistently. Do you have some area, right? Like some teams can be quite good, but really bad in one particular area. Like you might be really bad in pass defense. LSU's really bad in run defense this year. And if you play a good run team, even if they're worse than you, if they lean on the run, they actually should be favored over you. And so I think the ranking does a really good job of balancing that as best as you can. And I'm pretty pleased with how it comes out because the numbers aren't too crazy. I think some SEC fans are going to complain about the bottom half of the conference being as low as they are. Again, this actually is conference adjusted. That's one big thing that we really worked on in the model was to create a system for conference adjustments. It's just where they are this year as the SEC and where the bad teams are. I mean, again, Auburn barely beat Cal, so you got to factor that kind of stuff in. Yeah, it's fun. Hopefully you guys like it and comment on it, and I'm curious to know if you guys just want it on the website, you want videos. Again, like and subscribe if you want videos so you can follow it and continue to comment, but we're really exposing ourselves a little bit to you guys, trying to put this out there and open ourselves up to feedback.
All right, let us know in the comments what you think about both the Nerd Nation Top 25, if the nerds got it right, not just all our nerds, but you as well, and what you think about our new power rating. We've got to come up with a different name for it, Josh, because it's not, like you said, it's not actually a power rating. It's something else. We'll come up with something sufficiently nerdy, but either way, it will probably be up on the website by the time this video comes out. If not, maybe a day or two after, but hopefully by then. Go ahead.
As to say, I'll open it up to commenters. Why not do this, right? Like, guys, comment on the video and tell us what you think we should name it.
What should we name it? Yep.
Yeah, we'll put a placeholder and maybe we'll go through the comments and figure out what we think the best name is.
Pinned comment at the top. Y'all name our poll. Check it out, collegefootballnerds.com. Like and subscribe. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.